Hello and welcome back. A little while ago we did a comparison between the then new Photo AI from Topaz and the other versions of their software, Denoise and Sharpen AI. And at that time I felt that Photo AI wasn't quite up to the mark. Now since then there's been a number of advancements and revisions, and it's time now to have another look and see how they compare. And the results are very interesting. So let's jump in and have a look at a couple of examples. So before we get started, let's answer two simple questions. And the first one is, why are we bothering with programs like Topaz and others to reduce the noise in our images? Surely Lightroom comes with a dedicated denoise facility, which, after the debacle of the old version, the new version works pretty well. So why do we need to bother with a third-party piece of software? Well, the answer is that it doesn't work well enough, and you can do better with these third-party plugins. And the second question that you may well ask is, why do I need to bother with denoise when I'm shooting all my photos at low or base ISO anyway? Surely there's no noise in those photos. Well, the answer to that is there's always some noise in your photograph, no matter whether you're shooting at low ISO or in the middle of the day or whatever. There will be some noise, and if you're particular about producing the best quality image that you can from the captures that you make, then you'll need to have a look at this. So let's firstly look at what the difference is between using Lightroom's denoise and the techniques we're going to have a look at here. Here's an image, or a detail of an image taken on 2000 ISO, handheld, of some flowers in the botanical gardens in Edinburgh, and it was high ISO. It was a bright overcast day, but it's pretty noisy. And so if we use the Lightroom denoise and then apply some sharpening within Lightroom on the same image, yes, it's definitely improved. Let's go back. Here's the original. You can see a dreadful amount of noise here. Lightroom's technique has improved it somewhat, but when we look at the versions and things we can do with Topaz, it's on another level again. And so in this video we're going to compare Photo AI's sharpening and denoise system with that of the dedicated Denoise and Sharpen AI, just as we did some time ago. And we're working on version 3.1 of Photo AI as of the time of making this video. So to answer the other question about shooting on low ISO settings, let's have a look at the version of a photograph taken on base ISO on a bright sunny day. You would think there's no noise in the image, but when you have a close look, and this is zoomed into 100%, there is a little bit of softness there brought about by some base noise in the photograph that can be removed using these techniques. So all photographs will benefit from some noise reduction, but which one's best? Let's have a look and compare a few typical images. So this is our first example. It was photographed at 400 ISO and contains a lot of fine detail and textures. And we'll firstly take it into Photo AI and have a look at the interface and what the settings available are, and then we'll do the same thing with Denoise and Sharpen AI. So to access Photo AI or any of the plugins, you need to go to the Filters menu and select the appropriate filter, and it opens in a new window, the Topaz Photo AI interface, and after some initial processing it comes up with a number of options and you can add enhancements. And in this case all I've done is add denoise to this image, and you have three options: normal, strong or extreme. I've just let it do its normal settings or automatic settings and apply the settings at that particular strength. When you're done, you just export the photo back to Photoshop, and that layer comes back into Photoshop with the enhancements applied. And while we're looking at Photo AI, obviously then you can add the sharpening as a further enhancement, and again you only have a few different options. You have standard, strong, lens blur or motion blur, and the software attempts to find the best compromise for you. In this case I've just again allowed it to do its automatic settings and then it's applied that sharpening, and we'll take that back into Photoshop the same way by going back to export to Photoshop. So in the same way that we access the filters from Photoshop for Topaz Photo AI, we would go to the filters menu, Topaz Labs. In this case, let's have a look at the Denoise AI and have a look at the options we've got available to us there, because there are a lot more options with this particular package that may or may not be an advantage to you. Let's just drag that back over. And so you have here, we have an automatic option where it will choose for you what it thinks is the best, and in this case standard, and it will apply some model preferences here. So if you use the auto setting by clicking on this button, it will apply some noise removal and some sharpening at the same time. And if we move that around to more or less the same position, you have a preview window where you can see on the left hand side before anything's applied, and on the right hand side with the denoise and sharpening applied. Or if you just wanted the noise only, you could just remove the sharpening aspect of that. And then once done, you click on apply and go back to Photoshop. And finally, just to have a quick look at the Sharpen AI interface, very similar to Denoise, filters, Topaz Labs, Topaz Sharpen AI, and we'll have a look at the options there, because there are a number of different options with our sharpening package, a little bit more than you have in Photo AI. And again, this may or may not be a benefit to you if it gets too confusing. Let's just move this back over to where we were. And if you have a look here, we've got multiple different models, and some of them sound a bit scary, but a lot of them don't really vary that much. So let's just allow it to choose which model it thinks is best. So it's set out of focus, very blurry, and again I've just allowed it to apply its own parameters. Now you'll see there's not much blur being applied here, but it's also doing a bit of noise suppression, and you will see a progress bar down the bottom of the screen. Now one thing I have to say, between the Denoise and Sharpen AI and using Photo AI, is that Photo AI processes the image much more quickly than either of Denoise or Sharpen AI. But at the end of the day, it's the results that count. So again, we have an interface. We have on the left hand side unprocessed. As we move that slider across, we can see the effect of the sharpening. So we're not going to bother coming back and looking at these windows from here on in. I've already applied all these options, and we'll have a look at them as different layers within Photoshop. Okay, so we're back in Photoshop, and I've applied all of these different filters as layers, and so that we can compare them. But the first thing we want to do is we want to be able to have a look at this at close details, and let's just zoom in on that rather messy part of the roof here that is covered in chimneys and various other bits and pieces. So zoomed into 100%, we've got some stone texture, we've got some bright details and so forth. So let's have a look. This is the unprocessed version, so it's got a bit of noise in it, not dramatic. So firstly, let's just look at using Photo AI, using its noise reduction only, no sharpening applied, and you'll see quite clearly once I turn that back off again, if you look at the details here and on the roof slates, by using Photo AI denoise only, it's already made quite a substantial difference to the image. It's cleaned it up. It might look slightly plasticky, but it's certainly removed a lot of that unwanted noise. So that's not a bad option to start with. So the next thing I did was I did the same thing using Photo AI, but used the denoise and a bit of sharpening within the program as well. And the difference is absolutely minimal. There's the sharpening applied in Photo AI on this particular image makes virtually no difference at all. So let's just proceed then from here on and see how it compares. So the next option was to use denoise instead of Photo AI, and I've just allowed it to do its standard settings with a little bit of sharpening applied. So if I turn that on, you'll see now, compared to Photo AI, which is what we're looking at here, if I turn it back on, you'll see it's a little bit different. It's got a little bit more of a grungy look to it, a little bit more texture, maybe a few more artifacts in there, but overall not a bad result. maybe a little bit more texture, maybe not quite as much noise reduction. And again, it probably just comes down to personal preference. So that's not a bad option. But what about if we do denoise, but without any of the sharpening, and then we add the sharpening separately using Topaz Sharpen AI, and that's this version. And to be honest, there's virtually no difference between using denoise with its own sharpening and using denoise and then going separately back into Sharpen AI and applying the sharpening there. So in this case, with these particular textures, if I just compare denoise with sharpening to Photo AI, we've just got to choose the right one. I think in this case, Photo AI, given that it has given a slightly better result, maybe a slightly cleaner result, slightly better detail in the slates, I would say that in this case, for this particular application, Photo AI has done a better job. But there's not a lot in it. It's really nitpicking, and it's a little bit of personal preference. This one, the Photo AI looks, as I said, slightly plasticky. Denoise and sharpen gives a similar result with maybe a little bit more texture left in. So either way, both do a really good job, and there's not much in it. We're zoomed into 100%, and most people are not going to be really that fussy. So for our next example, we're going to move away from the buildings and all the textures there. We're going to have a look at a landscape image. This was one taken at about 250 ISO, early morning, relatively low light, but still bright enough. On a tripod. Let's see what the differences are. And again, as I've said, all images have some noise associated with them, even at base ISO. So let's just zoom in on this particular standing stone, and you'll see that in the background the sky has a bit of noise in it, and it's a little bit hard to tell if there's noise on the stones because there's a lot of texture, but in the grasses in the foreground, we'll have a look and see what the differences are. So firstly, Photo AI denoise only. We have a look at it. Look at that background. It's cleaned that sky up beautifully, but it's done something slightly funny to the texture in the stone. It's cleaned up the grass all right. Let's have a look at the grass. It's pulled back some detail there. That's fine, but I'm a little bit concerned about that. So let's have a look at then Photo AI denoise and some sharpening applied. And it's a little bit hard to see here, but let's zoom into 200%. With the sharpening applied, it's started to introduce in these very fine textured areas some color noise. I'm not sure what else we can call it, but it's just gone a little bit funny. And if I turn both off and go back to our base image, you'll see that the noise has affected this slightly. Just using the denoise only has made a few odd little pixelated sort of impacts there, but when we use the noise and sharpen in Photo AI, it's gone a bit haywire. Let's have a look and see what happens if I use the Topaz denoise on its own and allow it to use its own sharpening. It's much different. Let's go back to 100% because that's a little bit unrealistic, but let's have a look here, and I'll turn the other layers off so we can compare it to the background. We can still see that noise, a little bit of texture in the stonework. Denoise and sharpening, it's certainly killed all that background noise, and it hasn't really impacted the texture on the stone too much. It's cleaned up the grass a little bit, maybe not quite as much as Photo AI. So let's have a look then, and using denoise without any sharpening and then using separately Sharpen AI, does it make much of a difference? Well, I think it does. I think it makes just a slight difference. Again, we're nitpicking here, but I think it brings out a little bit more detail in the grass at the bottom and just gives us a little more separation. But in this particular instance, the thing that concerned me was that the Photo AI denoise and sharpen introduced these funny colored artifacts, and it's one of a few images where I've experimented with using this package, and on these very fine details it seems to introduce some sort of random noise into the image. So in this instance, a particular landscape, using Topaz Denoise and Sharpen AI separately gives a better result, and we don't get that funny sort of color noise affecting the image. So now moving along to another example. This is the one where I used Lightroom to make its own denoise version, and we saw that it was okay, but it wasn't great. And let's just zoom in on this photograph to 100% so that we can see it clearly. Here's the base photograph. This one was taken at 2000 ISO on an overcast day, handheld, and obviously a little bit of noise because of the aperture and the high ISO. So we can see here quite a lot of noise and some details being lost throughout. So let's just have a look here. That was the background image. Let's have a look at the version using Photo AI and its default sharpening settings, and it looks pretty good. Let's just move this over a little bit so we can see some more of these little stamens. Looks really good. The background's cleaned up nicely. Let's just turn it off again. You'll see that there's quite a lot of noise breaking up the details here, and we can see right down into the base. It's not looking too bad once we apply Photo AI Denoise and Sharpen. It's really cleaned that up a lot. There's not a lot of separation between these stamens, but I think that's as good as you're going to get. So let's have a comparison there, and using Topaz Denoise and its own auto settings, it's very similar. It's maybe not quite as good as Photo AI in this instance. It's just lost a little bit of particular sharpness down here, and you'll see it's not quite as good here. But what happens if I use Denoise and then I apply the Sharpen AI over the top of that as well? Let's have a look. Well, using that Sharpen AI and Denoise, it's just managed to pull out just a little bit more detail. Let's compare it to the Sharpen, the Photo AI version. This is the version using Denoise and Sharpen AI. This is the version using Photo AI, and again, there's not much in it. There's a little bit of difference in the detail here, but there's a little bit more detail down the base of the flower using the Denoise and Sharpen AI, and using Photo AI. Very, very similar. And if we come back and look at the whole flower, and if we compare the two at this sort of level of magnification, you're really struggling to see much of a difference. So in this case, either or does a really good job and really improves the image out of sight and picks up the detail that would have otherwise been lost. And particularly down here with these little stamens here, if we go back to the base image, a lot of that has been lost in the noise, and the software has managed to bring that back beautifully. And I think in this case Photo AI is just marginally better overall, but again, not much between them. So far we've got a pretty good comparison. We've just got that odd instance where with some fine textures the Photo AI has done something funny with those very fine textures, but otherwise it's pretty much neck and neck. And finally, one more example, this time also another flower from the botanical gardens. And this time we're going to have a bit of a closer look at some of the other aspects of how the image is sharpened and denoised. So let's just zoom into 50% on this particular image. I want to see the background as well as the petals on the leaves as well. So here's our base image, a little bit of noise. It was photographed at slightly lower ISO, 1800 ISO. Again, still the noise is not too bad, but let's have a look. Photo AI and its automatic sharpening, it does a really good job. It's brought out the fine detail in the petals, it's sharpened up the stamens, and overall it's done a pretty good job. We've got some of these out of focus areas in the background, and sometimes you get a slightly different effect there. It's pretty good. It has been sharpened a little bit, but certainly all of that noise, if I turn that off again and we look in those dark areas, all that grainy noise is gone, and so it's done a really good job. So let's compare Topaz Denoise plus Sharpen AI applied together, and it's a very similar job. It's probably not quite nice, as nice as the Photo AI, but we've got another example here. That's denoise and a little bit of more sharpening, and with a slightly different setting. We've got the out of focus very blurry setting in Sharpen AI, and what I think has happened here is it's really helped to bring out the fine details in these petals. They are absolutely clearly defined, as is the color here, but what we do have is we have a little bit of a problem with the background. If I turn that one off, you'll see that it's actually brought back some detail that probably wasn't there, and in this instance I'd probably want to mask that out. But when we compare the water droplets and the texture in the leaf here, it's absolutely outstanding. Photo AI has done a good job. It's a very good job. If you had seen, if we go back to the original, you'll see that a lot of that fine texture is just not quite there, particularly here. If we look at the Photo AI, it's pretty good, but then with using our other settings, using the two packages, we can get just a slightly better result. Now, the bottom line out of all of this is that both packages are very much on a par nowadays. There are very minor differences, and depending on which particular settings you choose, which particular sharpening model you use in Sharpen AI, will give you slightly different results, and you may then find that you get some other little artifacts coming in some areas, but overall both packages do a good job. And if you can only afford one package, then I'd be saying buy Photo AI. But if you want a little bit more control and a few more options in your processing, then Denoise plus Sharpen AI will give you a few more options, and then I haven't seen any of that strange artifact issue with that fine texture detail that I did with Photo AI. So the two packages have improved vastly over the period of time. They're both very much on a par, and it's now a personal choice as to which one or which of these you want to use, and they will all give you a very good result. So I hope that's been useful. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.